Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of Seriously Risky Business. This is the podcast we do here at Risky Biz HQ, where we chat with Tom Uren, who is our cyber policy and intelligence editor. G'day, Tom. How's it going?
G'day, Patrick. I'm good. How are you?
Good. So this show and all of Tom's work here at Risky Biz is supported by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation and also Lawfare, who syndicate his terrific newsletter, which is also called Seriously Risky Business. And you can find that at news.risky.biz. We also have a sponsor this week, which is Nucleus Security, and they make an excellent vulnerability management platform for large organizations who are trying to slice and dice an awful lot of vulnerability information that comes in from all of their scanners and whatnot. So yeah, they're an interesting company, Nucleus Security. But Tom, we're going to talk through the newsletter that you wrote this week, and you've covered a few things. You've covered the Sophos Pacific Rim report, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I want to start off by talking about the arrest of this so-called Snowflake hacker in Canada, because there's a bit of an interesting dimension to this that we didn't pick up on in the regular Risky Business weekly podcast, which is just how central Telegram was to this entire crime ecosystem as it applied to this entire event.
Yeah, so what struck me is that in the wake of the arrest, there were a couple of pieces that kind of wrapped up the whole story, telling it from go to woe. Based on the online personas that this person allegedly was running. And it's like there's building blocks of crime. And one of the reports says, you know, this was just such an easy hack. And it is almost as if anyone could have done it. But the person involved was just very, very heavily involved in Telegram online communities. And that has left me wondering, if Telegram didn't exist, would this crime have happened? So he got into these cybercrime communities. One of them's called the Com, which we've spoken about before, which does a whole range of very nasty stuff. Some of it is just merely criminal. Some of it is extremely nasty, violent, abusive. And Telegram also acts as a kind of communications fabric for the cybercrime ecosystem. So one of the other building blocks involved in this was info stealers. So info stealers, they get onto people's computers and they steal credentials, essentially. And those are often marketed either via Telegram bots or on Telegram marketplaces, and also on dark web marketplaces. And at each level of what happened, you see that Telegram is involved in facilitating either the communication, the sale. So the alleged criminal here, he tried to sell some of the data via Telegram as well. And so it seems like there are definitely what I would call criminal building blocks, which are info stealers, different types of malware, phishing kits, that kind of thing. But there's also Telegram that seems to be a sort of communications fabric building block. It's the glue that holds it all together. And that's what really struck me about this story.
There's nothing here that you would say they couldn't have done without Telegram. But I think what's interesting, because you and I were talking about this before we got going, is it sort of removes a lot of friction from the process, right? Like it's just this one place, it's this one app where you can, you know, get involved in some of these communities. You can buy creds from info stealers. You can sell the data there. It's just end to end. Very, very convenient, right? And I think this is just what it looks like, isn't it? When you've got a comms platform, which has almost got some social media elements to it, and you just don't have moderation, this is kind of where it winds up.
Yeah. So you're right. You could do all of this without Telegram. I think my suspicion is it would just be a lot harder, and overall there would be a lot less crime if it wasn't there, if it wasn't facilitating so much, because it just expands the networks of connections that you can make.
And pulls in some of these lower skilled attackers. Because I think, you know, this guy was just buying passwords, right, from info stealers and then logging into things, which is probably explains why he got caught, right? Like not exactly genius levels of cyber criminality there. But, you know, perhaps that person, were it not for Telegram, might not have been pulled into that ecosystem and committed those alleged offences. Yeah,
so apparently some of the personas he's alleged to have run were quite good at SIM swapping, or appeared to be quite good at SIM swapping. So he probably is good at social engineering. I guess it depends, like, do you believe in radicalization? Is that a sort of pathway that leads him to do more and more of this stuff? And it just happened that Snowflake was just really easy to carry out. And so, it's not directly responsible, but it puts people on a path where they're more willing and able to carry out these sorts of crimes.
Yeah, yeah. Now, another thing that we wanted to talk about this week is the fact that we still don't know all that much about the Salt Typhoon hack against US telcos, which was apparently, we're just getting little snippets leak out into broadsheet newspaper articles in the US where they say, oh, they got some audio, but they don't really specify if it was call audio or if it was voicemail audio. And they say, oh, they got call records, which means that they got all of these, just incredible volumes of, information that talks about who connects to who. But we don't really know if that's what they were doing or if that's what they were after. I mean, ultimately, we need to wait for the CSRB report on this. But I guess, I wonder if CSRB is going to continue to exist in a couple of months, given the result of the election in the United States. But I think really the long and short of it is we still don't know what happened.
I think there's enough to know, it seems like, the intent. So there's been reports that it was targeted against presidential candidates, senior officials. It sounds very much like a typical intelligence gathering exercise. I guess the headlines come about because it is quite sensational when a whole series of US telcos, because it seems like, is it now close to 10 or a dozen, have been reportedly affected. Like, that's a big hack. It seems like that if this hack had gone on for a long time, undetected, it would be very, very significant. I think that picking it up, I would describe this as picking it up relatively early. It seems like it was a few months in. The damage is more limited. I think the longer that type of hack goes on, the more opportunities it gives for the groups involved to take advantage of what they do get and to set up other avenues to get access. It's a massive enabler, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, so almost a bit of a good news story in that it was shut down before they'd been embedded in there a couple of years, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. And so that is good. We're still learning more about what the actual damage is. Now, I think if they had got into the lawful intercept systems and discovered what possible Chinese agents were under surveillance, that would have been immediately very, very damaging from now on for many years, because that would have sort of supercharged the Chinese espionage system and neutered the US counterintelligence straight away. So we haven't heard that that's happened. That would be very, very bad news. I'm hopeful, optimistic that the CSRB will hang around. I think it's a very valuable institution. I think it would be good for this sort of breach, and not just for the US, but for other countries to see this is exactly, well, maybe not exactly, but this is what went on as far as we can say, and these are the techniques that are used, and this is why it was done, and at least forewarn other countries about what to look out for.
Yeah, and maybe provide some recommendations of, like, here's what some stuff you might want to do to avoid this happening to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the main piece that you wrote this week is you took a look, as did we, over on the main podcast, at the Sophos report into... So basically what they were doing is they noticed some of their customers were being attacked. They did a bit of investigation and found the devices where people were doing the exploit development to actually find the exploits to do these attacks. And then they pushed out, like, kernel level rootkits onto these devices so that they could collect a lot of telemetry, get a heads up on O-Day before it was the attackers got a chance to use it and all of that. Terrific idea. Seems like it was very well executed. Seems like it actually had a big impact in keeping their customers safe. So that's something we spoke about at length already here on Risky Biz. But, given that you're our sort of policy and intelligence guy, you've taken a little bit, you've drawn some conclusions on this as far as it affects like norms. You use this great line here where, you know, basically you said, look, you know, vendors need to respond to the threat environment, right? And currently, what did you say? You said, yeah, don't bring a banana to a knife fight, which I think is good advice. So you seem very supportive of this sort of hunt forward, like vendors doing this sort of hunt forward in their own products, and you'd like to see more of it. Were you surprised that this was controversial among some people that Sophos had done this?
I'm not surprised, no, but I think it reflects people behaving the same way they've always behaved, or thinking the same things that they've always thought. And I guess the concern is that all of a sudden a vendor is putting special code out on a particular device that feels a bit
intrusive, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the right word for it. And I think the flip side is that attackers are doing this all the time, and they're actually being more and more destructive. So who would you rather put code on your device? The vendor, who is at least trying to look out for your interests, in this case they definitely were, or just some random either cyber criminal or a foreign state putting code on your device, and the vendor standing back and going, hey, nothing I can do about it. Yeah. Not my problem anymore. It's your device. So I think I cite in the article a couple of examples where Chinese hackers have caused a huge amount of collateral damage. So either they've left web shells open so that criminals have taken advantage of them in the, what was it called? The Microsoft Exchange, that massive Microsoft Exchange hack where tens of thousands of boxes got rinsed. And another example is Barracuda email security gateways, where the hackers just dug in so hard that Barracuda eventually said, we can't guarantee that we can remediate these devices, so just chuck them out. So those are very, very damaging. They're difficult for customers to deal with. They're painful. Why would you put your customers through that if you've got another option to try and prevent those sorts of incidents from happening? So I think that's the sort of changing balance of the way other groups have behaved. So if they're going to escalate, I think it makes sense that you've got to do something in response. And just behaving the same way that you have for the last 20 years doesn't really make sense when everything else is changing around you.
When the environment changes, norms can change, but still be norms, I think really is the core of the argument. That's the guts of it, right?
Well, I don't think there are norms. I think there are just things that people haven't done before. Yeah, they're probably. I think there are norms against. Well, I was going to say against deliberately harming people, but ransomware actors do that all the time. And
well, I'm not saying that the bad guys are setting the norms. I'm just saying that like what you do in response has to be sort of like it has to be a little bit normy. Right? That's more what I'm getting at. And, you know, that's the stuff we have control over.
Your own internal standards.
Exactly, right? And I think, you know, you have to change your normal behavior in response to stuff that's, you know, increasingly aggressive. And I just think, you know, I did an interview with the Sophos CISO that I published to YouTube. I know you watched that. I thought he spoke really intelligently about that part of it, which is this is something that they wanted to talk about publicly because it needs to be a public discussion about, well, should we be doing this sort of thing? I think they're pretty confident that the answer should be yes. And indeed, Ross McKercher, who's the CISO there, told me that he's spoken to other people in his, you know, his contemporaries at other vendors, and they're like, they want to know more. You know, they're a little bit curious about doing this sort of thing themselves. So I think it was sort of brave of Sophos to be the first here, but you know, you're right. I mean, people who aren't doing this are bringing a banana to a knife fight.
Yeah, that's right. I got the sense, Ross didn't say it in the interview, but I got the sense that he felt like he was tacitly endorsed by cybersecurity authorities, just in the other things that he said in the interview. So I thought that was reassuring.
He speaks like someone with an intelligence background as well. And that was really funny because Adam asked, like, is this guy at GCHQ or something? And I went and looked at his LinkedIn. He's been at Sophos since 2007.
Right.
So I think the answer is no, not an ex-spook, just smart. Seems to have a good grip on these issues. But you like me seem pretty supportive of what they did here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said, you've got to respond to changing times. And, maybe once upon a time, people lost a bit of data, and you could, in a way, blame the victim and say, well, you should have done better or whatever. I think when the consequences rise, the responsibility that a vendor has to take has to rise as well. And so, the number of things you can do once a product is out there is, well, you've just got to explore that entire space. You can't just sit back and say, well, we're only going to do this limited subset of things because that's what we've always done.
Yeah, we're going to review our code and try to get patches out there faster. Yeah, no, 100%. All right, Tom Uren, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion. Always fascinating, and we'll do it again next week. Cheers.
Thanks, Patrick.